You were in the bar mitzvah, imagine.
Austin, in Texas. I was actually the first time.
Was flown in 1997.
Shalom everybody, welcome to the session. Yesterday, Sunday, I had the privilege to speak in the March of the Living, Monday. This is the 19th time that thousands of Jewish youth from all over the world, 45 different countries, are marching from Auschwitz to Birkenau, and then there is a memorial assembly. And yesterday I told them that this was my birthday, because 62 years ago, as a child, I was liberated by the American authorities, the American Army, General Patton, in the concentration camp of Buchenwald, which is in the suburbs of Weimar, as each of you know. I told them the story which was told by an American officer in presence of President Reagan on the same April 11, day of liberation, but 1983, in the capital center of Maryland. There was an ingathering of 23,000 survivors of Holocaust. President Reagan was there, and the officer of the American Army, Herschel Schachter, told them that when he entered by the first jeeps into the concentration camp, first time in his life, he was shocked to see a heap of corpses just after the gate. Blood, screamings, injured people, not only dead, but behind that heap he saw a couple of two vivid eyes. He turned around and he had discovered a child. Child was seen like 5, 6 years old. He understood that this child must be a Jewish child. Who other can be in this hell? He embraced the child. He smiled to him. He cried when he saw this whole phenomenon. And then he asked him in Yiddish, close to German, "How old are you, my child?" And the child answered, "What difference does it make? Anyway, I'm older than you." He was completely sure that I'm not well. If a child can answer to a soldier of the army that he's older, so he asked me, "Why do you think that you are older than me?" And I answered, "Look, you cry and you smile, you behave like a child. I don't smile and don't laugh for years. Even crying, I stopped already. So tell me, who is older?" This child was me in April 11, 45, the 28th of Nisan, Tafshin Hey. This happened 2 months before I became 8 years old. I told them yesterday in Auschwitz this story, which was told by Rabbi Schechter, an American chaplain who became later the president of President's Conference of American Jewry. He was the soldier. President Reagan shook my hand, saying to me, "Let me touch a living legend." And since then, I think to myself, is the time of crying or smiling reappear? Can we enable ourselves? Can we enforce ourselves to smile, to cry? What did we learn out? What is the message? What are the conclusions if we can take something and learn from that disaster, Holocaust? Dear friends, I must tell you that sometimes I think bitterly that all what we learn from the history is that we didn't learn of it anything. I will mention one detail. We are a nation who suffered of starvation more than any other nation in the last 20th century, maybe in all mankind's history. How do we react to the fact that 2 months ago, on February 2007, the head of the Organization of Food and Health of the United Nations, Mr. James Morris, announced in New York that every day, 18,000 kids die of starvation all over the world. The only time in my life that I demonstrated in opposite of our Knesset, the Israeli parliament in Jerusalem, was on August 1968. What was the demonstration? I saw the pictures in the newspapers. We didn't have television yet at that time, 68. I saw the pictures of children in Biafra, in Africa, dying of starvation. This was a picture I will never forget. It reminded me our times, in my early childhood. A black child on his knees, almost fainting, almost dying, and a black bird turning around his head, waiting for the second that the boy will close his eyes, will die of starvation, and the bird will have his food. This may happen in the 21st century, when there are so many witnesses from both sides of victims and mainly from liberators after World War II. And 18,000 children die not of a tsunami in the Far East side, not from any kind of a disease. It's not AIDS, it's not cancer, it's not heart problems. It's lack of organization, lack of concern, standing with doing nothing, standing on the blood of innocent children. And this may happen only 62 years after Auschwitz, Belzec, Treblinka, Majdanek, and many others. So I think we didn't learn anything. Did we? If we would learn, we wouldn't behave with such apathetism, so unconcerned to the problems and the troubles of another nation, especially innocent children. The story of Holocaust was not told by me or by my colleagues, survivors of Holocaust, after World War II. I was privileged to be among the first 200 children who came legally to the land of Israel before the establishment of the State of Israel. We arrived on July 45 already to port of Haifa, 200 orphanages. And we didn't speak and we didn't tell. We were shocked, we were painful, and sometimes we were very embarrassed to tell the story, how the world behaved to us, and we couldn't do anything. Hear the stories of the underground movements to establish a Jewish state, and the stories of the heroes of the Independence War, which took place a year and a half. Our friends told about their heroism, and we spoke about being victims. The only thing we could say was, look, in Europe, not all the victims were Jewish, but all the Jews were victims. This was the only thing we could tell, nothing but it. We didn't say, we didn't tell, the world didn't know. Then in the early 50s, a very special book was printed and published in Hebrew also, The Diary of Anna Frank. I was very curious to read it. I heard on the radio about it. My uncle and my aunt, who have brought me up in their home, they were the substitute to my parents who perished in Holocaust when I was 5.5 and 7.5 years old. My uncle and aunt were hidden the book from me. They didn't want me to go back to those dark tunnel. But I found it as a babysitter by our neighbors. I was very disappointed. The Diary of Anna Frank, which made such a noise all over the world and was translated into dozens of languages, doesn't describe even one day in a ghetto, in a labor camp, in a concentration camp, in a death camp. Speaking about the shelter in Amsterdam, social problems, family problems, I thought to myself, look, if you will tell one day of Buchenwald, carrying the skeletons, the bodies to the crematoria, people who couldn't wake up in the morning, of weakness, of diseases, of typhus, of being beaten, of starving, of freezing, this will make a noise. But what is that book of Anna Frank? Later on, when I was 15, 16 years old, I understood. We spoke all the time about 6 million victims. It was a mistake, because 6 million is an enormous number that a human being so limited and weak, cannot identify with an astronomical number of 7 numbers. Even when we spoke about 1.5 million children who perished in the Holocaust, we couldn't get the same affection. 1.5 million is too big. One child, Anna Frank, black eyes and hair, so sensitive, so talentful, writing her own diary, her experiences, her thoughts, her mind, her feelings. It's easy to identify, to feel sorrow, and to say, what a pity that this child in age of 12 probably perished somewhere in one of the concentration camps, probably Bergen-Belsen. We made the mistake speaking about millions. We didn't describe the sorrow, the pain, the destiny of a family, of a community, of one human being. One. Later on, we have discovered that we made a mistake, and we started to tell. When was it? In the Eichmann's trial, 1961, 16 years after World War II ended. People came up on the stage telling witnesses what they have seen in Auschwitz, Birkenau, and other death camps. One of my friends was the very famous author of Holocaust, Yechiel Feiner. In Hebrew he called himself Yechiel Dinur, but well known as Katzetnik. Katzetnik was a pseudonym, an anonymous name. He undersigned the books which described all his experiences in Auschwitz. He was one of the witnesses. This was the only one time that he appeared, he showed his face, and he spoke. Usually he was hidden in the shelter, writing, as he told me, not with ink but with blood, his story. After 2-3 minutes, speaking about Auschwitz, the other planet, describing what he have seen on that rampa when Mengele made the selection, right and left, left and right, death and life, life and death, Katzetnik fainted on the stage and couldn't continue his witnessing. When I have met him many times later, I told him, Michiel, I don't agree with you that you say it was on another planet, Auschwitz. It was on our planet. Same planet. I come from Buchenwald. 8 minutes walk from the National Theater of Weimar, the resource of culture, humanism, philosophy, and all the arts that German was so special and unique in them. Deutschland. 8 minutes from the theater where Goethe and Schiller and all the composers were there, authors, philosophers. The crematoria of Buchenwald, you can see it till this very last day. How can you say another planet? That's the problem. That's the disaster. Appearing like us, speaking, maybe having even mercy to a cat or to a dog, giving water to the flowers, and not giving water in the wagons to the people who were sentenced for death in the same planet. The story of Eichmann's trial opened many, many wounds. And then, many years later, almost 30 years later, the Iron Curtain collapsed. All the Israelis who were disconnected from east of Europe, and with an Israeli passport you couldn't reach all these places in east of Europe, because of the collapse of communism, in 3 or 4 hours, Holocaust became much closer to the Israelis, including the youth marching in the March of the Livings. Look, in 3 hours you are in Kiev, you see Babi Yar. In 4 hours you are in Warsaw, 1 hour later in Treblinka, 2 hours later in Majdanek. In 3 hours you are in Krakow. 50 minutes from Krakow you are in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Holocaust became not a legend, not a story of Exodus from Egypt 3,300 years ago, but became very close, very known, very famous. A place you can touch. You can see the shoes, you can see the dollies, you can see the hair, you can see the suitcases, you can see the barracks, you can see the crematoria, you can see the gas chambers in Majdanek. It's real. And then the sad reason which makes Holocaust very close to our hearts is the fact that we became a little bit older, 62 years older, and we started to write our memories, booklets, books, seminar works in the universities, witnesses, Yad Vashem and many others, and many books appeared in all the languages almost, describing what we felt, where we were, numbers, no human beings, just numbers. 1995, April 11, exactly the anniversary of 50 years liberation of Buchenwald, as chief rabbi of Israel and the youngest survivor of Buchenwald, I was asked to come to Buchenwald, where there was an ingathering of all the survivors who lived 50 years after Holocaust. Jews and non-Jews from all over the world, South America, all Europe, North America, Israel. We came to Weimar, to the National Theater. Among us were Nobel Prizes from the United States, Spain, France. And I told them, look, the difference. 50 years ago, in 4 months, on January 45, I arrived here not as a human being, but as a Häftling, prisoner, number 117030. Häftling Nummer 117030. No name, no personality, no rights. Now, 50 years later, I come to you as the chief rabbi of a Jewish independent state, the state of Israel. I have my name, I have my title, I have my function, I have my home. Do you think that because of this change, we can forget everything and forgive everything? I want to tell you no. We cannot forget, and we are not authorized to forgive. Who gave us the mandate of forgiveness? My father, who perished in Treblinka in the age of 50. My mother, who perished in Ravensbrück in the age of 44. My brother, who perished in Treblinka in the age of 13. How can I forgive in their names? We cannot take revenge. The revenge is that we exist, that we are alive, that we have our home, that we have our families. This is the only revenge we can take. We cannot forget, and we are not authorized to forgive. On September 1993, I have met in Castel Gandolfo with the former Pope, late John Paul II. He said to me, Nachelny Rabbin Lau, Chief Rabbi Lau, I remember your grandfather, Rabbino Frenkel Teomim, from Krakow, walking to the synagogue on Shabbat. I'm quoting the Pope exactly. Surrounded with very many children. How many grandchildren did he have? The answer was 47. How many survived Holocaust, he asked me. Only 5. 42 grandchildren of my grandfather, including my brother, 13 years old, perished. And this is from my mother's side. In addition, I had cousins from my father's side. The Pope looked at the ceiling and said, wherever I go, and I was visiting already over 100 states all over the globe, I always mention and emphasize our commitment, our obligation, mankind's obligation, for the future and the continuity of our senior brother, the Jewish people. These were the words of John Paul II on 93 in Castel Gandolfo, on March 2000, when he came to Jerusalem to visit the chief rabbinate, to visit the president, to visit in Yad Vashem, and to visit at the Kotel, the Wailing Wall, in the old city of Jerusalem. And then I was with him participating in a symposium of peace in the outlook of the monotheistic religions. he represented Christianity. Sheikh Al-Tamimi have represented the Islam, and I represented Judaism, speaking about what I called the light in the end of the dark tunnel. 6 years we lived in a dark tunnel. Did we go out of it? I am not so sure. If we hear even today, 62 years later, a president of a large state, Iran, member of the United Nations organization, United Nations, please be aware to this expression, United Nations. If he can say there was no Holocaust, we have to liquidate the Zionist identity state of Israel, to erase it. And he is a member of the United Nations. And he says this in the times that we are still alive. And those numbers are still tattooed on the arms of the very few survivors who survived. The numbers are here. And you can see the crematoria and the green and blue stains on the walls and the ceiling of the guest chambers in Majdanek today. So did we come out from the dark tunnel? Tell me. I'm not sure. I can add to it one small episode. On July 1982, almost 40 years after World War II, standing in a street in Melbourne, Australia. East St Kilda is the neighborhood, the street named Hatem Street. With another one who is dressed also like me in a rabbinic dress and black hat, undoubtedly Jewish. A car stopped. Inside of the car there were two people in age of 40 to 50, dressed very nice, dresses, ties, and one of them screamed out, "Jews! Did you pay the bill for the gas you used in the chambers?" And the car moved. I look at my friend, born in Australia. This was my first visit to that continent, asking him, "Hershey, did I understand well? Or my English is not wrong, not right. I'm wrong. It's impossible." He said, "Yes, unfortunately, that's what you have said, you have heard. Are you used to hear it?" He said, "This expression is new, but other expressions of this like I am used to hear here." So I said to myself, look, what do we have with Australia? The Jewish people or the Israeli state? Not a common border, not a problem of refugees, not decisions of UN 242 or 338. We have no fight, no clash, no conflict with Australia. How come that almost 40 years later we have to pay a bill? We, the Jewish people, didn't we pay enough? And for what? For whom? For which sake? We owe the bill? We are in an overdraft? Such an anti-Semite expressions you hear all over the world. Last year, 2006, even in a state, a friendly state like Canada, according to the statistic, you could find 953 different events of anti-Semitism, mainly verbal violence, not physical, in 1 year in one state, Canada. You know exactly what's going on in Europe. You live there, you are there. What we face, what we hear, what we can see and feel everywhere. So I doubt about the fact that World War II, with all its horrors, ended. Maybe, hopefully. I want, well, believe me, I really want to be optimistic and hope that this optimism will be realistic, because time came already, at least for the leaders of the nations, leaders of communities, spiritual leaders, and many religious leaders, to open a new era, a new paragraph, a new chapter in the book of friendship, understanding, and love between people, races, religions, and nations. Thank you for your attention. Thanks a lot.